Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 2, Text 37. Shinvan Grinam Samsmarayang Cha Chintayan Namani Rupani Cha Mangalani Te Kriyashu Yastvach Charanara Vindayor Avishta Chaitana Bhavaya Kalpate Shinvan, constantly hearing about the Lord. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. Grinnan, chanting or reciting the holy name of the Lord and his activities. Samsmarayan, remembering, constantly thinking of the Lord's lotus feet and his form. Cha, and Chintayan, contemplating the transcendental activities of the Lord. Namani, his transcendental names. Rupani, his transcendental forms. Cha, also. Mangalani, which are all transcendental and therefore auspicious. Te, of your lordship. Kriyashu, in being engaged in the devotional service. Yaha, he who. Twacharana aravindayo, at your lotus feet. Avishta Chaitaha, the devotee who is completely absorbed in such activities. Na, not. Bhavaya, for the material platform. Kalpate, is fit. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Even while engaged in various activities, devotees whose minds are completely absorbed at your lotus feet and who constantly hear, chant, contemplate, and cause others to remember your transcendental names and forms are always on the transcendental platform, and thus they can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. How bhakti-yoga can be practiced is explained in this verse. Srila Rupa Goswami has said that anyone who has dedicated his life to the service of the Lord, iha yasya harer dasye, by his activities, his mind, and his words, karmana manasa gira, may stay in any condition of life, nikal ashv apya avastasu, and yet is no longer actually conditioned, but is liberated. Jivan mukta sa uchate. Even though such a devotee is in a material body, he has nothing to do with this body, for he is transcendentally situated. Narayana para sarve na kutaschana bibhyati. Because a devotee is engaged in transcendental activities, he is not afraid of being materially embodied. Srimad Bhagavatam 6:17-28. Illustrating this liberated position, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prayed, Mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatad bhaktir ahetuki tvayi. All I want is your causeless devotional service in my life, birth after birth. Sikshastakam 4. Even if a devotee, by the supreme will of the Lord, takes birth in this material world, he continues his devotional service. When King Bharat made a mistake and in his next life became a deer, his devotional service did not stop, although some slight chastisement was given to him because of his negligence. Narada Muni says that even if one falls from the platform of devotional service, he is not lost, whereas non-devotees are lost entirely because they are not engaged in service. Bhagavad-Gita 9:14 therefore recommends that one always engage at least in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantas cha dridhavrataha namas yantas cha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, the great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. One should not give up the process of devotional service, which is performed in 9 different ways: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, etc. The most important process is hearing, Shravanam, from the Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, the spiritual master, the saintly acharyas, and the Vedic literature. Sadhu, Shastra, Guru, Vakya, Chitete, Kariya, Aikya. We should not hear the commentaries and explanations of non-devotees, for this is strictly forbidden by Srila Sanatana Goswami, who quotes from the Padma Purana. Avaishnava mukhod girnam putan hari katamritam shravanam naiva kartavyam sarp ochistam yata paya. We should strictly follow this injunction and never try to hear from Mayavadis, impersonalists, voidists, politicians, or so-called scholars. Strictly avoiding such inauspicious association, we should simply hear from pure devotees. Srila Rupa Goswami therefore recommends Shri Guru Padashraya. One must seek shelter at the lotus feet of a pure devotee who can be one's guru. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advises that a guru is one who strictly follows the instructions of Bhagavad-Gita, Yare Dekha, Tare Kaho, Krishna Upadesh, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 7, 128. A juggler, a magician, or one who speaks nonsense as an academic career is not a guru. Rather, a guru is one who presents Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna's instructions, as it is. Shravana is very important. One must hear from the Vaishnav Sadhu, Guru, and Shastra. The word kriyasu, meaning by manual labor or by work, is important in this verse. One should engage in practical service to the Lord. In our Krishna consciousness movement, all our activities are concentrated upon distributing Krishna literature. This is very important. One may approach any person and induce him to read Krishna literature so that in the future he also may become a devotee. Such activities are recommended in this verse. Kriyasu yas tvach charanara vindayo. Such activities will always remind the devotee of the Lord's lotus feet. By fully concentrating on distributing books for Krishna, one is fully absorbed in Krishna. This is Samadhi. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine. Om Ajnana Timrandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We're completing soon, within 4 verses, the Garbha Stuti spoken by the demigods who secretly came to see Devaki when the Lord was residing within her womb, within her heart. The acharyas, they say both. Of course, the Lord can reside, he's already residing everywhere, so he can reside either in the heart or within the womb of Devaki. Now, when the demigods began their prayers, it was verse number 26, and these prayers go up for 16 slokas, up to verse number 41. The first thing they did was assert who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, that he was Satyam Param, the Supreme Absolute Truth. And then they went on to describe who we are. Just as a tree has 10 different aspects, so they went on to describe the Supreme Lord, his different incarnations, how we can approach the Supreme Lord through the teachings of the acharyas. And here they're describing this process that the acharyas give by which we can cross over the material ocean and finally attain Sri Krishna. Now, Srinvatam, all of these different activities that are being recommended by the demigods are heard throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the previous 9 cantos, and furthermore, as we read the pastimes of Krishna, for instance, today is such a special day, being Rasa Purnima, Krishna himself gives the exact same formula for how to attain perfection of love for him. When he was speaking to the gopis on this beautiful night, you'll see how beautiful it is tonight. This is the 2nd Purnima, the 1st Purnima, the Shravan Purnima. That's also celebrated as the, when there was Rasa Yatra. But this 2nd Purnima is especially beautiful. So Krishna himself desired to enjoy this Rasa Leela, and therefore, he was only 8 years old, of course. He began to play his flute. And he has different types of flute playing according to who he wants to attract. He has flute playing for the cows, and he has special flute playing for the gopis. So he began to play on that 5th note. This is describe the different types of notes that Krishna plays. And all the gopis, individually, they didn't know that each gopi was also being attracted. Whatever they were doing, they dropped everything, hearing Krishna's flute playing, and they ran to him in any condition. And though their relatives tried to stop them, they discarded them and met him. And each gopi was coming from a different direction. And when they finally reached Krishna in the forest, just nearby here, there's an area, Bansivat, and a beautiful, the whole area, Dira Samira, on the banks of the Jamuna. Krishna called them to that place. And when they met him and surrounded him, Krishna gave them the exact same instructions that we're receiving today from the demigods. That just by hearing about me, by speaking about me, by meditating on my transcendental form, you can attain perfection. There's no reason to have physical proximity to me. Therefore, you should all go home. So the gopis, being super excellent devotees, the topmost devotees of the Lord, this exact same instruction was given to the Yajnik Brahmins' wives. Practically the same sloka was given. There's no reason for you to come and be with me. You all go home, remember me, chant about me, hear about me, and you'll attain perfection. The Yajnik Brahmins' wives, they couldn't counter what Krishna was saying to them, and therefore they went home. But the gopis, having such exclusive devotion to Krishna, they convinced Krishna that we've given up everything for you. Our whole lives, our families, all moral restrictions, everything, to come and meet you, just out of pure love for you. And therefore, how can you drive us away? So Krishna was defeated by the gopis by their preaching, and therefore he agreed to satisfy their desires. Now when Parikshit Maharaj heard this, he was surprised, because Parikshit Maharaj, he hadn't taken part in the Braj Leela. Of course, he was born as the grandson of Arjun, so it's 2 generations after Krishna and Arjun had their pastimes together. So immediately he asked the question to Sukadeva Goswami that how is it possible that one can approach the Lord with lusty desires such as the gopis had? And Sukadeva Goswami gave the most perfect response. He said, even if you approach in kam, in krodh, in bhai, which is fear, krodh is anger, in sneha, which is affection, such as the yadus did, in aikyam, wanting to become one with the Lord even, such as the 4 Kumaras were doing, and in sohridam, in friendship, suhrit. Any of those 6 things that are considered to be mundane qualities or mundane relationships, you can still attain perfection. And Sukadeva Goswami told Parikshit Maharaj that, you remember I told you about how Shishupal attained perfection. He was so angry at the Lord, krodh, this is the second. So the first is kam. Kam was the gopis, they're approaching him with lusty desires. Next, krodha. So Shishupal was so angry with the Lord, but just by that anger he was always meditating and talking about the Lord, and because of the absolute nature of the Lord, he attained perfection. Then bhai. So we're reading about here in this pastime, Kams. He was the personification of material fear. Not only did he create fear in others, but he himself was so full of fear. And that fear caused him to be 24 hours always meditating on Krishna, because he was afraid of Krishna. Krishna for him was personified death. And he was always thinking, when will that death personified come? Then the suhrit, that's sneha, that's the yadus. So the yadus, the demigods, out of affection, because they consider Krishna to be a family member, they're also attached to Krishna and always thinking of him. So in that way, Sukadeva Goswami answered the question of Parikshit Maharaj, that even if one approaches the Lord, they're not material lusty desires, because material lusty desires means to satisfy one's own senses. But the so-called lusty desires of the young gopis, just young girls, that was to satisfy Krishna's desires, and that's why it was pure. So then, Sukadeva Goswami, he goes on to describe the beautiful pastime of the Rasa Leela, how Krishna enacted the singing and dancing, how the young gopis became proud, considering themselves the most fortunate women in the world, how Krishna disappeared and took with him his most beloved, Srimati Radharani, although her name isn't mentioned, how the gopis searched for him everywhere, and they were so absorbed in his pastimes, his form, his leela, that they began to imitate Krishna. And then finally, just as we're singing every night here during the Kartik month, chapter 31 of the 10th canto, the Gopi Geet, it's that time that the gopis, while they were searching for Krishna, they sang that beautiful song of 19 slokas. And when Krishna heard that song, he decided to again appear before them. So that's why we sing that song during this month, because that's when this pastime is going on, when the gopis are searching desperately for Krishna in the forest, and then Krishna reappears to them. And then they enact the full Rasa Leela together, enjoying. Then, because of their fatigue, even though it's a little chilly this time of year, they still enter the Jamuna, splashing each other, enjoying together, coming out. And then Parikshit Maharaj again, he interrupted, and he asked Sukadeva Goswami that, how can the Supreme Lord, who is the establisher of all dharmic principles, break his own rules, his own moral principles? This is contemptible. So Sukadeva Goswami immediately replied him. He said, for the controllers, whatever appears to be immoral in our eyes, we have to understand that the supreme controllers are just like fire. Whatever you put into a fire becomes purified. So whoever, just as these 6 different ways of approaching the Lord appear to be impure, because they're approaching the supreme controller, Krishna, any way they approach the Lord, those sentiments become purified. So in that way, Sukadeva Goswami warned Parikshit Maharaj and warned all of us as well, the audience of this conversation, that it's not for us to judge Krishna's behavior. We celebrate him as the biggest thief. We celebrate him as having so many girlfriends, so many lovers, so many wives. But Krishna is not an ordinary human being. When Krishna married 16,108 wives, it wasn't that each wife had to wait 16,108 nights to be with him. No, he was able to expand himself and satisfy each and every wife in their own palace, give each one 10 children, like that. So Krishna is not like an ordinary human being. Now when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we all know, is the combination of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. He came for several purposes. External purpose was to preach pure love of Godhead in the simplistic form of chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra in this Kali Yuga. Nama Rupe, the Lord appears. His avatar is the holy name now. And he had many pastimes. And one of the pastimes that we read about is when he was in his educational leelas as a youth. And one great scholar came, Keshava Kashmiri. Now, in the previous life of Keshava Kashmiri, he was a great acharya, and his name was Nimbark Acharya. Today is his appearance day. Now, Nimbark Acharya, when he was there in that form, he was in Navadvip. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he describes how Nimbarkacharya met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As a Brahmin, they were in a particular part of Navadvip called Bilvapaksha, Belpukura, here in Vrindavan it's Belvan. And they were, because of the Bel, we worship Lord Shiva with the leaves of the bel fruit, the bilva. So they were worshiping Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva was particularly happy with this particular Brahmin, and said, you enter this forest, and there you'll find your gurus, the 4 Kumaras. So this Brahmin, Nimbarkacharya, he entered within the forest. After searching, he found the 4 Kumaras headed by Sanak. And they gave him transcendental knowledge. There's a beautiful sloka, just one song, just as we have Brahma Sangita in our Sampradaya. In their Sampradaya, they have Sanak Samhita, where he speaks about how to worship the Supreme Lord. So he received Diksha at that time. He received the teachings of how to worship Radha and Krishna. And by following Sanak Sangita, Radha and Krishna were very pleased with him and appeared before him. And then they showed a most beautiful form. They combined together and revealed to Nimbarkacharya the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained to Nimbarkacharya that I will be appearing in Kali Yuga, and you will be Keshav Kashmiri. Now I will defeat you, and I will take from each of the 4 sampradayas two different axioms. And from your sampradaya, I will take the 2 aspects of the supreme glory of Srimati Radharani's worship of Krishna, and of the super excellent position of the gopis and their service to Radha and Krishna. Then he was given the Radha Krishna Mahamantra, which is just like our Mahamantra, except instead of saying Hari, they say Radhe, Radha. Same effects are there of meditating on the Supreme Lord through that Mahamantra. And then that way, Keshava Kashmiri, after he was defeated by the Supreme Lord, and Saraswati revealed to him that actually this is your Lord, the combined form of Radha and Krishna. So then he began to preach. So this preaching goes on in all of the 4 sampradayas. And specifically, Nimbarkacharya, he preached the philosophy of Dvait Advait. He preached that the Supreme Lord is always separate from the jivas. And he gave 2 examples. When you go to Navadvip, you'll see when the Jalangi and the Ganga meet, they're 2 different colors, and the waters actually don't mix. Each particle of water remains with its own special qualities. So he said this is the way the merging of the living entities with Krishna actually are. They come together in love, but they don't lose their identities. Just as the 2 waters of 2 rivers don't lose their identities. And he gave another example, that you can have a bag of white mustard seeds, you can have a bag of black mustard seeds. You can mix them together, but they still maintain their white and black colors. So this was taken, and the Achinta Beda Beda Tattva that's taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was enriched with the same philosophy of simultaneous sameness and difference from the Supreme Lord. So these are 2 different, so many things today. Maybe I forgot to bring it. One other event today is the marriage of Tulsi Maharani and Shalagram Maharaj. That can either be performed on the Ekadasi, the Dwadasi, or the Purnima, any of these last days. This also shows Krishna's absolute nature. When Srila Prabhupada instituted the worship of Shalagram for the first time in ISKCON, he did mention that we should all be worshipping Shalagram in his books in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it hadn't been instituted yet. So the first Shalagram was worshipped in Mayapur, and that Shalagram's name was Sri Gadadhar. And the Pujari, Jananivas, after he had begun the worship, he asked Srila Prabhupada that, what is this form of Shalagram? Because Prabhupada hadn't explained much in his books. And Prabhupada very simply, he explained Vrindadevi, that's Tulsi Maharani, and Krishna, they had an argument. And that argument, from that argument there was cursing and counter-cursing. And Vrindadevi cursed Krishna to become a stone, and Krishna cursed Vrindadevi to become a plant, a beautiful tree with which he would be worshipped, and they would always be worshipped together. So then later, as usually happens, the devotees, they began to research what was this argument, why did it happen, and then we read in the different shastras how Vrindadevi, she had to take birth within a demoniac family, and then her husband Jalandhar. This is a long story, and the ultimate conclusion is that Tulsi Devi and Shalagram are eternally combined together in marriage. and even Lakshmi Devi, who is eternally worshipping the lotus feet of Narayan, she has to share those lotus feet with Tulsi Devi, because Tulsi is always at the lotus feet of Narayan. So, aside from being the last day of Kartik, it's also the last day of the Bhishma Panchaka. Bhishma Panchaka are the last 5 days of Kartik. And these 5 days were particularly given by Sri Krishna to Bhishma Dev so that he could prepare and completely give up all material activities and thoughts and just concentrate on his lotus feet. Now this whole month of Kartik, another name that we'll read about in the Nectar Devotion, is Urja Vrat. There's Kartik Vrat, which is the same as Urja Vrat. So the Nectar Devotion that Prabhupada translated from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that came out at around 1970. And the devotees then had the handbook, the science of how to practice Krishna consciousness, bhakti-yoga. So by 1972, the devotees were asking questions further how to execute the things that are mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So here in Vrindavan, 1972, Srila Prabhupada had just, in March, he had just put the groundbreaking here, and then he quickly wanted to make sure that the temple was going to be constructed very quickly. So he came back and had the first big program here. Because there was construction going on this property, Prabhupada decided to stay at his rooms at Radha Damodar. This is October 1972. And he decided to speak specifically the whole month of Kartik on that nectar devotion. And the devotees stayed at the Keshi Ghat. So one day the devotees were asking Srila Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, you mentioned, now is Kartik, and you mentioned in the Nectar Devotion about this Urja Vrat. What is Urja Vrat? So Prabhupada replied, he said, no eating, no sleeping, simply chant Hare Krishna 24 hours. Can you do it? And the devotees, they just started chanting Hare Krishna to start off, but they knew they couldn't do it. Who can chant Hare Krishna 24 hours, no eating, no sleeping, for a whole month? So nowadays, although it wasn't known to us at that time about Bhishma Panchaka, the devotees in 1969, Jayapataka, he was a brahmachari at the time, he asked Prabhupada, what is the significance of this month of Kartik? And Prabhupada explained in a letter that actually all of these vrats that are followed during Kartik, they're for the people who don't do any devotional service for the rest of the year. Because the devotees, they're engaged in devotional service 365 days of the year. They don't need to perform extra vrats to get different benefits. Because simply by engaging in devotional service, just like it's mentioned here, Mama Janmani Janmanishvare Bhavatad Bhaktir Ahaituki Twayi. Ahaituki, that means they're not performing devotional service to get anything from the Lord, to get some points, to get a beautiful body, to get a beautiful voice, to be able to live in Vaikuntha, to be able to go to Goloka Vrindavan. Devotees don't even think about those things. They're only interested in ahaituki apratihata. Ahaituki means no cause of their devotional service, and apratihata, nothing can stop it. There's no obstacle to performing devotional service. So the devotees, they perform devotional service every day of the year. And Prabhupada gave an example to Jayapataka that just like if there's a store, and that store has its regular customers that come and go every day, but sometimes they'll have a big sale to attract more customers. Discount, they put up the signs everywhere. And then people who don't normally come to the store, they'll come to get some discount, some benefit, for cheap. So Prabhupada said that's what Kartik is, all of these ruts. It's for people who don't do anything the rest of the year, and then they hear in the Shastra, if you do this, you'll get that. If you do this, you'll get that. And they, oh yeah, I want that, I want that. So then they do all these ruts. So Prabhupada, in that way, diminished in the sense that for the devotees, there's no reason to do anything more than what we're already doing, because we're already 100% 24 hours engaged in Krishna consciousness. Nor do we want anything from the Lord. Because when you read in the Hari Bhakti Vilas that if you don't eat this, this, and this, you'll get this. And if you do this, you'll get that. So, but devotee, we're not businessmen. We're not merchants. That if I do this, then I'll get that. We don't care. Just like the gopis during the Rasa Leela, they didn't care about their families, about everything they left behind. They just wanted to satisfy Krishna because they had such strong affection for him. So the devotees, because they're already engaged 12 months out of the year in devotional service, they respect all of these ruts. They encourage people, yes, come to Vrindavan, do your vrat, do whatever you can. Try for the Urja vrat, no eating, no sleeping, 24 hours a day chant Hare Krishna. But because we know it's not possible, there's level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, anukalp, just as in Ekadasi vrat. Now everyone knows that we should do Nirjala Ekadasi every time, but it's just not possible, because if we're out preaching, if we're working hard in the temple, so anukalp means you can do as much as possible. Just eat roots and fruits, just eat one time a day, whatever you're able to do to continue your service. But we shouldn't stop our service, and that's the important thing in this verse. And Prabhupada gives a lot of significance to 2 words in this sloka. And that is, avishta cheta. Avishta means to always be absorbed, and cheta means kriya, activities. Now sometimes devotees have an aversion to using the word work, but Prabhupada very clearly, he says cheta means to work, to be engaged in activities. And that's what we're doing. We're working day and night for Krishna, for our spiritual master, under his instructions to please Krishna. And out of all the different types of work, that's devotional service, in other words, Prabhupada gives special emphasis to one particular type of activity if we want to attain the perfection of yoga, which is called Samadhi. So what is that one activity? We all know that. Book distribution. Book distribution, another impetus. Gita Jayanti Marathon. Now for the devotees who are engaged in book distribution, every day of the year, 12 months out of the year, Gita Marathon is simply an impetus to encourage devotees who are not engaged in book distribution to at least spend 1 month out of the year in trying to help others become Krishna conscious. That take a little time out of your business, take a little time out of your family, just try to distribute Prabhupada's books. But for the devotees full-time engaged in book distribution, they're doing that every day of the year anyway. So we just try to encourage others. And the reason we try to encourage others to engage in book distribution is to help them develop that most important quality of a devotee, which is compassion. Because devotees are not engaged in service to get anything from the Lord. So compassion means whatever Krishna consciousness you have, you want to help the fallen souls. And that's what the demigods are describing in these Garbha Stuti. That the acharyas, they have left the method by which we can cross this ocean of material nescience and attain the lotus feet of Krishna. And that method is given in the Shastras. The Guru, the Sadhu, and the Shastras. This is the three ways that we get this information. So, by out of compassion, we can take time out of our lives and try to help those who do not know about Krishna consciousness by giving them books, the Shastra. That compassionate endeavor will help them come out of this Bhava Sindhu and attain the lotus feet of Krishna. We've heard in the last few days, Panchagoda Prabhu, who did 20 years at the airport. How many years? 20 years at the airport. Now, I tried once to do airport Sankirtan. The police caught me within 10 minutes and kicked me out. It is so difficult to do airport Sankirtan. I had to stay at the bus terminal because the police, I used to feed them cookies, so they let me stay. But you can't pay off the police at the airports. You have to be really smart. And he did it for 20 years. So devotees who spent their whole youth, all of their energy, in trying to distribute Prabhupada's books, they're simply trying to share with you how to help others become Krishna conscious. We should listen carefully. Now we have books written about book distribution. We have book ministry headed by Sheshika Prabhu. And we're learning all the different methods, how we can instill within the society Prabhupada's books. Before it used to just be one-on-one. Now we have online, now we have Zoom, we have so many different ways to preach Krishna consciousness that weren't available before. But these different vrats, particularly the Kartik vrats, the Bhishma Panchaka vrat, and now this month, the Gita Jayanti vrat of distributing Prabhupada's books, we should, if we're not engaged in these activities for the rest of the year, we should try our best to do as much as we can. During Kartik, we should chant Hare Krishna as much as possible. We have the wonderful 24-hour kirtan going on, which is like the beating heart of ISKCON. Prabhupada told our first temple president that this temple is the heart of ISKCON. And kirtan is that beating of the heart. So this 24-hour kirtan, if you have nothing else to do, no other service to help with the book distribution, to help with the deity worship, you sit down and just chant Hare Krishna because that's the recommended Urja Vrat, 24-hour Hare Krishna Kirtan. If you can't do that, you do some other type of service during Kartik. So those of you who are visiting, who are not full-time engaged in Krishna consciousness for the rest of the year, you should please take advantage of these different vrats to increase your chanting, to increase your serving, and now, starting officially tomorrow, for the next month, try as far as you can to develop this compassionate mood of helping others become Krishna conscious by giving them one of Prabhupada's books. Because if they don't read it today, if they don't read it 10 years, sometime or other, they will see that book, they'll pick it up, they'll open it, and even if they read a few lines, it'll change their life. Just like when we distribute prasadam. Prasadam is such a wonderful effect. Here we have, Prabhupada quoted one sloka here from the Padma Purana spoken by Sanatana Goswami in the, again, Hari Bhakti Vilas. The last line is, Sarpa uchistham yatha. So sarpa, that means a snake. And uchista, we know there are different types of uchista. Just like sometimes a new person will give them prasadam. And that new person, without understanding anything about prasadam, they'll say, oh, this tastes so special. What is it? What is the ingredient you put in this that made it taste so nice? So we know that it's the uchista of the Supreme Lord. It's the remnants. That special ingredient Prabhupada describes is Krishna's saliva. Yes, that's what Krishna's saliva tastes like. So delicious. And that's what makes prasadam taste so nice, this uchista. So prasadam has that special uchista quality of Krishna's touch, his remnants. But the uchista of a snake, that'll have the quality of a snake, which is poison, venom. So therefore, if we hear, in fact, within Krishna consciousness, we never have to hear Mayavadis, professors, nobody, because we have such a strong program of Shravanam Kirtanam. Twice a day, all throughout the day, so many activities. It's only if we make great endeavor by stepping outside of Prabhupada's instructions that we would ever hear from Mayavadis or not unqualified speakers. Prabhupada would strongly forbid us to go to see the Rasa Leelas, to hear from speakers outside. There's so much going on within our temple, and still people would make the extra endeavor to go outside, and Prabhupada would strongly forbid them. He said, if you don't like the classes, for instance, I wonder why they're having me give class. If you don't like my class, if you don't like anybody's class, you give the class. That's the whole solution to, oh, I don't like to go to the classes, they're not inspiring. Then you give the classes. That's what we should do in Krishna consciousness. We don't have to go outside. Within the program that Prabhupada has given us, if you don't like the kirtan leader, you lead the kirtan. If you don't like the classes, you give the classes. But we never have to go outside. Why? Because Sarpa Uchistam. It's just like hearing, that hearing is just like poison. The Uchista, the remnants of a snake. So this Shrinvan, this is the first word in this sloka, it's the most important. Hearing from the right source. Every day we get this opportunity, and we get to read Prabhupada's books, we get to preach, and we should take the topmost benefit of these special months in the year, Kartik, this Bhishma Panchaka. If you couldn't perform the Kartik vrats of chanting Hare Krishna, then within these 5 days you squeeze it all together and you eat as less as you can. It's not that you have to eat cow dung. No, you can eat fruits, you can eat whatever you're able to live on. But the important thing is not what you eat, it's what you do with your tongue, the chanting. That means you reduce your eating so that you can increase your chanting. And if possible, you don't eat anything for 5 days. Who can do it? Nobody can do it. Don't sleep for 5 days. Who can do that? Only the 6 Goswamis, they can go without sleep. Srila Prabhupada, he was able to go with just a few hours of sleep because there was such an urgency. He had so much to give before his body wore out. And after his demise of Prabhupada's so-called material body, of course, we know it was completely spiritual, Prabhupada attained Samadhi. Now, what does Samadhi mean? What is the definition of Samadhi? Prabhupada gave it right here in this slok. By fully concentrating on distributing books for Krishna, one is fully absorbed in Krishna. This is Samadhi. So Prabhupada used to tell us, work now, Samadhi later. So our work, we can do any type of work, but our work is book distribution. And whatever we're doing is to support that book distribution. Even if we're cleaning the temple, even if we're cutting the sabjis, we're cutting the sabjis for the devotees, so the devotees will eat prasadam, so they have the strength to go out and distribute books. We're cleaning the temple so that when the devotees, people get the books, they come to the temple, they see how beautiful and clean the temple is. Everything that we do is to support this book distribution. And if we see our activities like that, all of our work, all of our kriya is for attaining Samadhi. So therefore, we should take advantage of this month coming up as far as possible We should be compassionate to the living entities, try to distribute Prabhupada's books. If we can't directly distribute Prabhupada's books, we should assist the preachers in any way possible. Prabhupada gave the example of a boxer. You know, they have a sport, two boxers are fighting together. It's not just the two boxers fighting. The boxer has a coach, he has a masseuse, he has a cook, he has a family, all the backup. And that backup is what's giving him the strength to go into the arena to fight. So those who are on the front line, now there was some years ago, the book was banned here. What was it called? Mothers? What is it? Masters of... Anyway, someone came up to me one day. I was running to the bookshop. They said, "You're just like a soldier." I said, "I'm going to the bookshop. Leave me alone." So, the misunderstanding. We have to understand that yes, we're a part of Prabhupada's army. And that army is to defeat Maya. Whatever our situation is, whatever our work is, we're all part of the same army. Prabhupada is our Senapati. And this army is a war against Maya, so that we can try to bring in as many living entities as possible and help them find out about Krishna and eventually enter into that supreme Rasa Leela in the spiritual world. Any questions? All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Motherji, for your blogging class. When in the beginning, in the first half of the class, you were mentioning how there are 6, like Bhaya, Kam, and the Vaishnava was asking question and how that is being utilized in Krishna service. So my question is particularly about fear. I mean, it's very difficult to, when such tendencies come, it's very difficult to do repose to Krishna. And particularly, Mataji, I wanted to ask about fear. So
Fear.
Yes. I mean, like fear, like what I perceive is, comes basically fear of the uncertain and fear of the uncertain and fear of one's own mistakes. So at that time, it's very difficult to even face. I mean, like when it is a fear of our own mistakes, it's difficult to face Krishna. And if fear of uncertain, then also it's very difficult. Can you please?
Yes. Fear is number 3 mentioned. And in verse number 41, fear is specifically discussed by the demigods to Devaki. They say to Devaki, Devaki, you have nothing to fear, because Devaki is the personification of bhakti, and Kamsa is the personification of this fear. And she was always afraid of Kamsa. And that fear of Kamsa purified her, so much so that she was able to get rid of the 6 enemies: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Madha, and Matsarya. So this fear acts in our life. And Prabhupada recommended, he chastised the devotees that you're not afraid enough of the material nature. He said that, yes. Because we don't understand that if we become lax in our Krishna consciousness, if we don't follow the 4 regulative principles, just as described here, because of negligence, Bharat Maharaj, he was worshipping Shalagram at Badarik Ashram. And because of his affection for this little deer, he neglected his puja. And because of that negligence, he had to take birth as a deer. But if we fear this material nature, then we won't be negligent in our devotional service. So this fear is actually a purifying element in our life. Just as Devaki, because she had so much fear for Kamsa, therefore she was able to get rid of those 6 qualities. So the fear in our life also purifies us. And that fear will motivate us to never break the 4 regulative principles or be negligent. Is that okay? Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you so much for the class. I want to ask you about this December book distribution marathon. In this way, I want to ask for your blessings. We are going to Delhi with the Harinam group to make the Harinam book distribution. And I want to ask for your blessings. And also I wanted to ask you, like, I don't know, but when you talk, you increase so much these desires to special book distribution, no? Because normally we can hear so much about different service, but we can see in general, like, this service of book distribution is so much like glorious. And I wanna ask to you how I can keep this desire in my heart, like, to be part of this book distribution, especially if we have family, especially if we have responsibilities, if we need pay this, that, but now I am in this situation that I am seeing how much, like, slowly by slowly, I am losing this intense desire for make book distribution each day in the year, no? And when I hear you and I hear about your experience in Krishna consciousness, I feel inspiration for us ask about what is this energy, from where is coming this energy that you keep these desires all the life, how I can also increase this desire for maintaining this devotional service of Harinam and Sankirtan distribution.
There's Vishnu Tattva and there's Shakti Tattva, right? And Radharani, she's the supreme, she's the Mula Prakriti of the Shakti Tattva. And Radharani is the personification of compassion. So when we meditate, when we chant Hare Krishna, within our heart, all of us, I'm sure, are thinking of Shri Shri Radha Shyam Sundar, Radha Krishna. So Radharani is with Krishna in the heart. Now you'll be going to Delhi. There is Radha Parthasarathi. Now some devotees with limited vision, they asked when Prabhupada named the deities Radha Parthasarathi, that Radharani, she wasn't on the battlefield with Krishna. Where do you get this name Radha Parthasarathi? And Prabhupada countered that wherever Krishna is, Radharani is there also. She can't live without Krishna, Krishna can't live without her. There's a beautiful book, Uddhava Sandesh, where when Krishna was leaving with Akrura, and they went to Akrura Ghat, and then the two Krishnas separated. The Nandanandana stayed here, and Vasudev Krishna went on to Mathura. So Vasudev Krishna, he was lamenting to his friend Uddhava. He was meditating on all his pastimes in Braj. So he was feeling separation. Therefore, he wanted Uddhava to understand everything that was going on here in Braj. So he was missing Radharani, and then Radharani, she was missing Krishna. So this Radha Krishna Leela, if we remember that Radha and Krishna are always in our hearts, Radharani is the compassionate feature of Krishna. Compassion means we want to help others become Krishna conscious. So because we're carrying Radha and Krishna in our hearts, that compassionate figure is right there. And therefore, as we become more and more Krishna conscious, we become more and more compassionate. Prabhupada was the most compassionate. He went everywhere. Dharmatma, he says, I only want you to talk about Prabhupada in Vrindavan. But Prabhupada was always in Vrindavan wherever he went. So the preachers, even though they're outside of so-called Vrindavan, they're always in Vrindavan consciousness, always meditating on Radha and Krishna. And when you really meditate on Radha and Krishna, you develop that compassionate nature of Srimati Radharani. I hope this isn't too complicated, but this is what motivates me to always distribute Prabhupada's books, because that's the most compassionate thing we can do to help people come to Krishna. Give them a book. Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
Hello. Hare Krishna.
Yes, work. Speak.
Can I call you Mother?
Yes.
Respect you, Mother. Actually, I have one confusion. My question may be some stupid type, but I want to ask if you don't mind. So, actually, in the during what in the spiritual what you were explaining just before. So, Mother, you were telling if he wants to make happy Krishna. My question is this: why he wants to make happy Krishna? This is my question.
Is that your question? Why do you want to make Krishna happy? Well, Mam Aivangsa Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Krishna explains to Arjuna in the Bhagavad-Gita that all of the living entities are his parts and parcels. So if we're a part of Krishna, when Krishna is happy, we automatically become happy. The example given in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that if you have a tree and you try to give water to each of the leaves and branches, the tree will not survive. But if you pour water on the root of the tree, that water will be distributed to all of the parts of the tree. So therefore, if you try to make Krishna happy, because Mam Aivangsa Jiva Loke, because every living entity is a portion of Krishna, by making Krishna happy, you automatically make everybody happy. So that's why we try to please Krishna, because we want to make everyone happy. Okay?
Before birth of the Krishna, there is no way to make happy to us before birth of the Krishna.
No, Krishna did not take an ordinary birth like us. Krishna, by his own pleasure potency, decided to appear here to manifest his eternal pastimes so that we would be attracted to get out of this material world. We came here by our own free choice because we didn't want to make Krishna happy. We wanted to try to make ourselves happy. So Krishna, he allowed us to take birth here. 8,400,000 species of life, we're still trying to be happy and we're still miserable. So Krishna, at specific times, he comes and he displays what's going on in the 3/4 portion of the creation, in the Vaikuntha planets and in Goloka Vrindavan, so that we will give up this false attempt to become happy independent from him. So when he comes here, which is very specifically described when he's coming, who his parents are, everything, when he comes here and displays his pastimes, if we hear about those pastimes, just as the Rasa Leela, which is tonight, the benediction given by Sukadeva Goswami, that anyone who hears these beautiful pastimes of the Rasa Leela, the disease within the heart, which is material lust, will be completely vanquished. So just by hearing the pastimes that Krishna manifests, all of our unhappiness will disappear. It's not that he was born and then he died. No, he came from the spiritual world to manifest his pastimes so that we would be attracted and return to the spiritual world. Okay?
Can we make happy Ram?
Yes, of course. Krishna Ram, that's why we chant Hari Ram also.
Okay. Or before that, Narayana is there, God Narayana.
Yes, they're all coming from the same place. They're all Vishnu Tattva.
So why we in ISKCON temple we are focusing only Hare Rama, Hare Krishna? Why not on Narayana? We are not focusing that much on Narayana.
Yes, we worship Narayana. Shalagram is also Narayana. We worship all the forms of the Lord.
Okay.
Yes, because everyone has different relationship with the Lord.
we are chanting Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. In that case, we are not mentioning Narayana, means God Narayana.
Well, within Krishna, all of the different Vishnu tattvas exist.
In Krishna, in Rama and Krishna, all these things are existing. So
There-
that's why we are focusing that for
Yes.
chanting Hare Rama.
You've heard of the Das Avatar? Das Avatar, the 10 major incarnations of the Lord. Have you heard of the 10 incarnations? The Lord has so many incarnations, they're like waves of an ocean. He appears in so many different forms. So when you chant the name Krishna, all of those forms of the Lord are contained within the form of Krishna. That's why we chant very loudly, Hare Krishna. Okay, time is finished. Hare Krishna. Jai.